Good morning, my friends, and welcome on the feast of St. Patrick. It's lovely to spend a little bit of time with you on this great feast day. This is Father Marcus from the Costa Blanca Anglican Chaplaincy. I'm going to just share a few little stories about St. Patrick on this feast day. This is normally a huge feast day in different parts of the world with great St. Patrick's Day parades happening here, there and everywhere, and lots of people reveling in the life of the saint, the patron saint of Ireland. It has been known that people drink Guinness on St. Patrick's Day, and it's normally a huge festival. But this year, a little bit muted, things differently. But we're going to make the most of it, and I'm going to tell you just a few stories. And Patrick is an incredible saint. Born in Ireland in about the year 373, but there's a vagueness about that. Ireland still occupied, ruled by the Romans at that time. And a couple of stories about when he was young. So this is when he was still living at home. There is a lovely story that he was out looking after the sheep, and a wolf came and ran off with a little lamb in his mouth. And when he got home and told his mum what happened, she was really cross with him for not protecting the sheep. And Patrick was heartbroken at being told off by his mum. And so he went into his room and he prayed all night long. And he went back out into the fields the next day, early in the morning, and the wolf brought the lamb back and dropped the lamb in front of Patrick, and the lamb ran off to be with his mother. It's a lovely story. I like it as a story. I'm just sharing it because it's a great story, saying no more than that. But the story about Patrick develops when he was about 16 years old on the beach. Remember, he lived in Wales, and some pirates came and kidnapped him and took him off to Wales, where he was sold into slavery, and he lived a really harsh and hard life for a goodly number of years in Ireland, looking after flocks and herds and working in the fields over there. Was very hungry most of the time and poorly treated, and he had a vision one day that a ship was going to come and rescue him, and as a consequence of that vision, he fled the field where he was working and went down to the beach, and sure enough, there was a ship that took him back to Wales, and he was reunited with his family. But this time in Wales had had a huge impact on him, and he wasn't just heartbroken because of the kidnapping and the difficulty he'd had with the work he'd had to do, but he had grown very fond of the people of Ireland. And later on, he had another vision or religious experience, which was God telling him to go back to Ireland and to try and spread the Christian message over there. People were pagans and not embracing Christianity at all. And Patrick was very concerned about this. Interestingly, he loved the people of Ireland, but he didn't think he was capable. And his writings at this time were, the writing wasn't great, let me put it that way. But he was inspired, breathed in the power of the Holy Spirit, and went back to Ireland. And as the legend is, he became the Apostle of Ireland, spreading Christianity right across Ireland, and was loved by the people there, and became a wonderful saint and a very, very holy man. It's true, you know, that he converted many of the people in Ireland. A lot of the pagans didn't like the fact that he was challenging their beliefs, but he lived a life in fear of martyrdom, but he humbly spread the Christian message far and wide. There are legends that you will know about St. Francis. The most popular and well known is the preaching about the Holy Trinity using the clover, the three-leaf clover, the shamrock, should I say, the shamrock, and the three images of the shamrock representing the Father, Son and the Holy Spirit of the Trinity. And if you can see, I've got one on my picture of St. Francis behind me there. And the other one is, of course, how the legend has it that he drove all the poisonous snakes out of Ireland. Ireland being a very fertile land and lots of green grass and lots of shrubbery around about and snakes here. And the legend has it that Patrick drove them all out. Wonderful stories, certainly worth hearing. But there are other stories that perhaps we're not so familiar with. I told you the one about the wolf and the lamb. There's another one which is very peculiar, and it's a story of a man who was known as the most ugly person in the whole of Ireland, and he was a lovely person and had lots of gifts, but his face was just people didn't want to look at it. People didn't want to look at it, and it caused him such utter distress. And the consequence of it was that he was not, he didn't feel able to live to his full potential. And he came to Patrick, and Patrick said, "What do you want me to do?" And he said, "I want a face that's just normal." Patrick said, "Well, like what?" And he said, "Well, like your bookkeeper." And so Patrick said to him, "Well, you need to spend time with my bookkeeper and we'll see what happens." And so this man and the bookkeeper spent some time in the bookkeeper's place. In the morning, the man's face was absolutely similar to that of the bookkeeper. You could only tell them apart because of the bookkeeper's beard. Just sharing it. It's a story. I don't know whether it really happened, but it's a story, and it just shows something of the compassion that Patrick had. And the last story I'm going to share is when St. Bridget came to Patrick and said that she was concerned because the men of Ireland were taking too long to propose to the women. And what was Patrick going to do about it? And Patrick thought about this for a while, and he thought, and it happened to be a leap year. And so Patrick decided that it would be a good idea if on a leap year, on February the 29th, women could propose to men. And so Patrick introduced that into the lifestyle of Ireland. And it is still tradition today that on the 29th of February, the women are allowed to propose to the men. I'm sure these days all that sort of who can propose to who has gone completely out the window, but it was a tradition and it still is a tradition. But Patrick wanted men to take it seriously. And so the deal was, if you were proposed to by someone who loved you, you should say yes. And if you didn't say yes, you had to buy them a silk dress and give them £100. It's a great story. It's a great story. It happens once every 4 years. But anyway, sharing stories about St. Patrick. What I want to say after those stories, which are quite a lot of fun, is the inspiration that Patrick gives to me. He was captured by pirates and sold into slavery and sent over to Ireland. And that had a huge impact on him, and he wanted to escape, which he did do. But later on, after this religious experience and his fondness for the people of Ireland, he went back into the thick of it. He went back to where he'd been held captive, and rather than to punish people or to give them a hard time or tell them what ratbags they were, he shared the gospel story with them. And that for me is the inspiration. It's a little bit like the disciples of Jesus after the resurrection who fled Jerusalem and walked the road to Emmaus. And it took them all day to get there. And on the way they met with Jesus and he asked them what they were talking about and they spent time together. And it was when they were eating a meal at the end of the day that they recognised who Jesus was. And once they recognised who Jesus was and he'd risen, Jesus disappeared from their sight. And they went right back into the thick of it, back to Jerusalem to tell people the story of the resurrection. And so both of those, the idea of Patrick going back to Ireland and the disciples going back to Jerusalem, just teach us that the holy thing to do is after the tough times to get back into the thick of it. And we've all been through these tough times of COVID and restrictions and the pandemic and our concerns and not being able to do the things we want to do. And as we come back out of that, and it will take time, we're not there yet, but as we come back out of that, I think our calling is to get back into the thick of living our Christian life and sharing our Christian story to the full. My hope and my prayer is that our churches will be full. Our churches will be full. And that only happens if we tell people the great things that God has done. So bless you, bless you, bless you. Happy feast day. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Embrace the goodness of a holy saint. I'll see you next time. Bye now.